Welcome, everyone. This is Erik Roth, shamanic astrologer, here with another episode of Science, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms. We're coming up on eclipse season, so we're going to be really diving into that in this particular episode. But this is just kind of a preview of more what I'm going to be talking about later on as well. So mostly focus on eclipses, but I'll have some announcements at the end of the episode. So stay tuned as you watch this for some more information here. All right, so let's get into this. The eclipse season of September and October of 2024. This is the 60th episode of this particular series, Signs, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms. And of course, Erik Roth here, taking you through this journey of the eclipses, coming up on September 17th and October 2nd, as far as North America time is concerned here. All right, let's take a look at what the major categories are. We're going to do a little bit of overview of the eclipse season and what is the eclipse season. We'll talk, of course, about the September 17th and October 2nd eclipses and the details about that, where you'll be able to see these eclipses and the astrological meaning behind them, along with the Sabian symbol meaning as well for each of these eclipses. Okay, so what is the eclipse season? Well, an eclipse season is when the sun gets within about 16 degrees of a lunar node. So we are now approaching that. We haven't quite gotten there yet. We're just, as of the time of this recording, we're still a few days away. The lunar nodes themselves, both the ascending and or north node and the descending and or south node, need to be one of the two need to be close to the sun when we move into eclipse season. So within that 16 degrees range. So, we're moving toward that point right now as of this recording. And so each eclipse season, we'll talk about this and what kind of eclipses come in. We'll also talk about the eclipse families. So not only is it just about the eclipse season, but also that each eclipse is part of a larger eclipse family that spans about 13 to 1400 years in time. Okay, so let's dive into that. First one up is the September 17th lunar eclipse. It's a partial lunar eclipse. There's only very small percentage of the moon that gets inside the shadow of the Earth. So you can see by this diagram, you see the sun, just the excellent diagram that I found here. This is our Earth. There's two kinds of shadows in this diagram anyway. There's another part of the shadow that's called the antumbra, which I'll talk about for the annular eclipse that's coming up. So you can see the moon in a regular eclipse, a lunar eclipse, the moon on a full moon dips into the shadow of the Earth. Well, in this particular eclipse, it's only partly in that shadow. It's mostly in this thing called the penumbra, and it's like the part of the shadow of the Earth that casts beyond just the regular solid shadow. So it's like the shadow of the shadow, if you will. So the closer it is to the umbra, or the closer it is to the lunar node too, as well, we have that's where we can get the more solid eclipses take place, both in the solar and the lunar eclipses. So here's the astrological part of this eclipse here. This is what the natal chart looks like. And you can see here the moon at 2540 Pisces and the sun at 2540 Virgo. But how far away is the node? Well, the moon is 11 degrees, so is the sun, obviously, from the lunar nodes. So that's pretty far. So you're not really going to get very much. Once it gets within about 10 degrees, then you start having more solid eclipses. Granted, they could still be partial, but you start to get within maybe 5 degrees, then they're much more so going to be like a total solar eclipse or perhaps a total lunar eclipse, or mostly in that range. So one of the things I wanted to note about this is that Jupiter is in a T square with this eclipse, and then Neptune is conjunct the moon at the time of the eclipse. So this adds kind of a more mystical, heart-opening, imaginative energy to this eclipse. So it's an eclipse where I'm going to share more about this, but when we look at this here, it shows like we have Pisces and Virgo, strong elements of this. So we're seeing a lot of like archetypal energy around being of service in the world, showing up and essentially being there, volunteering, not taking things for granted, but where one is needed without the ego involved. So it's like you're kind of suspending the ego a little bit so that you can show up for others and maybe even for yourself, but in service to maybe a higher level purpose. That's kind of what this eclipse is mainly about. But with Jupiter T squaring this eclipse here, we can see like a definitely a more imaginative energy popping in, more curious energy, but also a little bit of that sort of trickster, mischievous energy that's coming through too. So there's maybe a little bit more than just the serious business Pisces and Virgo, but we see a little more fun coming through with this Jupiter T square, kind of anchoring the eclipse here. Granted, it's not all that much; it's 5 degrees off of the a 90-degree aspect here, but still, I think it's definitely playing a role here. And Neptune's role is to add more mystical, out of like a place of not knowing. There's just like this sense of really not knowing where, you know, what one is supposed to be doing and just simply going with whatever is taking place. The expression going with the flow, with the focus in on service is a big part of this relationship here. Now, Saturn is here at 10 degrees away from the moon. So it does play a role in maybe something more practical and constructive here, but it's not that strongly positioned, if you will, as it's retrograding away from the moon at the time of this eclipse. So let's look at the Sabian symbol. We have a full moon lunar eclipse. It's only partial. It's the fourth full moon of the season, too. So we've had, I mean, this is really interesting. We've had three previous full moons. The third one's typically considered the blue moon, although I have talked to others that are in the know with these types of full moons of the season, where the fourth one is also connected into the what we call a blue moon as well. The other forms of blue moon is when we have two in the same month or two in the same sign. So it depends on, and so they happen a little more often than one would think. Once in a blue moon doesn't take necessarily decades, but usually every few years or so we get something like this when it comes to the full moons. So this full moon eclipse, partial. The moon will be in between the water bear and the constellations of the fish and the water bear. So it's that's where you'll be able to see the moon, and I'll share with you because most of the Americas will be they'll be visible in that part of the world as well as parts of Europe and Africa too. So we'll talk about that. So the Sabian symbol, we add one to the degree to 26. So 26 Pisces. This is what I found. I haven't come across this when I've done the eclipse season videos or posts where the symbol is the opposite of they say the full moon itself. So it says a new moon reveals that it's time for people to go ahead with their different projects. So the key words of this is diversifying, applying talents in a different direction, people splitting up and splitting off, new opportunities and potentials, the beginning of a new age, letting go of the old and not worn, separations, embracing one's future without the need for others, coming to a fork in the road, divorces, new jobs, directions, and destinies, as well as the dawning of a new era. So we have a lot of spark of like what a new moon represents, like symbolically, astrologically, but then it's applied to the full moons here with the eclipse. So looking at the shadow of that, looking at the shadow of the moon, and maybe the shadow of what we're doing with being of service in the world here. So we have those that are applied to all of this. And if we apply it in such a way where if we wanted to start something, because this eclipse, isn't going to come around again for a long while. So it could be something, if you wanted to start something and start a new direction in life, this would be the day to do it. Now, eclipses are famous for not making necessarily a major commitment to anything, particularly solar eclipses, because they're really intense. But after the moments of the eclipse passes, then you have that opportunity there, still kind of in that new moon window with the solar, and then the full moon window with the lunar eclipse. Okay, so where is this eclipse going to take place? Well, you can see it's a very faint eclipse. Only 3.5% of the moon is in the Earth's umbra, the main shadow. And here in the Americas, it takes place on the 17th. And in Africa and Europe and parts of Asia, it'll be on the 18th. And this is a map that's taken from timeanddate.com. And so that's a website I always recommend for some of these major events like eclipses, things about the seasons, and understanding how the differences in time and date and time zones and some history there. So it's kind of a quick hit website for some good information, and I always recommend that. So this is what I pulled this map off of, and of course this lunar eclipse. So there is part of an eclipse family. There's lunar eclipse families, and then there's solar eclipse families. So this is Saros 118. Each Saros is an eclipse family. And for each eclipse family, they take place every 18 years, and they're grouped in eclipse families called Saros. So it can span anywhere from 1,226 years to nearly 1,500 years, 1496. So it's 18 years and 11 days is what it is exactly. And the last time a solar eclipse took place in this family was back on September 7th, 2006 at 15 degrees Pisces. And the next one doesn't take place until September 29, 2042 at 6 degrees Aries. So you can go back and if certainly if you were impacted by eclipses that were happening at that time previously in this family, then there could be something in your chart, like say in this in the Pisces area here at 25 degrees Pisces here at this time in 2024, or in 2006 it was at 15 degrees Pisces, and or in Aries perhaps in 18 years from now, then obviously there is something in your chart perhaps, or maybe one of the houses that really impacts you in a big way. So this one is actually winding down, this eclipse family, and it will only be partial and penumbral lunar eclipses from here on out until it ends in 2403. And this eclipse family began in the year 1105 and goes on for a total of 1,298 years. So about 1,300 years here for this particular eclipse family. All right, so let's look at an annular solar eclipse. So you can see a total solar eclipse is pretty easy to explain. You've got the sun here that shows the image of that, but on the left side of off the screen here where the moon is. So it's during a new moon, but just so happens that the moon's a moon, because of its size and its distance from the sun and to the earth, it happens to be in this case nearly exact, or right exactly blocking the disk of the sun, or maybe a little bit more than the disk of the sun. And it creates what is called an umbra, and that umbra creates a narrow field on the earth where there's a shadow. And then the penumbra means that we have a partial solar eclipse happening in this field here. And then the annular eclipse, it's the moon is a little farther away from the earth. You can see how far away it is. And these images are from the American Astronomical Society, the AAS. So that's another place to go look for information as well. But you can see the umbra, it ends, but then there is an anumbra, which is meaning that because the disk of the moon is still in front of the sun, that there is it still blocks the light that's happening. So we get to see this ring around the sun here as it does this. And that's why it's called an annular eclipse, because annular, it's meaning ring. That's kind of a circle of dates, a circle of anything. It can be considered an annular, and there are certainly pieces of jewelry that also that are related to that family. Even the thing like an amulet and so forth, they're kind of connected into that. There's certainly some root words that are surround that particular description there. So this is something you can pause this, you can look at this and see, like for those that are out there that are able to see this particular eclipse, which I'll talk about where on the Earth it's located. Okay, but for now, let's look at I want to look at the astrological part first. So this eclipse takes place at 10:03, 10 degrees, 3 minutes Libra, and Mercury is only a degree and a half, and it's a south node eclipse. So there's a lot to do with the past in this eclipse, on October 2nd, 2024. So the eclipse is centered around a strong element of communication and building new relationships. There's also an element of what was once in the past that needs to be cleaned out and to make room for new ideas of working together in community. So it depends on where it might fall on your chart, what house, or perhaps a personal point, in a hard aspect or something along those lines that can also add additional meaning to the eclipse that you experience. Chiron is opposite here, but it's a pretty wide opposition there, and so is Mars is square to this, and even more so for Pluto. Mars does have a little bit more influence, so there is something about its Cancer energy being brought forth here around house and home that is taking action around that and around that, which probably in the context of community would make sense there. So let's look at the Sabian symbol of this eclipse. Again, October 2nd at 11:49 a.m. Pacific. That's the center of that. That's the new moon itself. And so with the sun in Libra, the new moon solar eclipse is annular and always the same sign as the sun. Now, it takes place in the constellation of the Priestess, which I have a night sky map that'll show what that looks like in the sky for those that are able to see that. The Sabian symbol is a professor peering over his glasses at his students. So the key words of this is lenses of perception, seeing that others get the message, intellectual snobbery, photography, lenses as shields or barriers between people and things, observing others, examining oneself, understanding where you're looking, giving advice, teachers, professors, the ability to read others as well. Interesting. Motivations or talents of others seen and appreciated. And both of these Sabian symbol definitions, they do come from the Sabian Oracle by Linda Hill. So that's a book that I recommend. It's influenced by astrologer Dane Ridyar and the original teachings of the Sabian symbols that come back over, I think it's close to a century ago, when some of those original thoughts and teachings came down about the Sabian symbols for the degrees along the zodiac here. So this is a new moon solar eclipse that really is looking at through lenses, through glasses that you're seeing, so getting clarification, seeing things more clearly, and also realizing that there's you might say, a barrier between you and what you are looking at. Perhaps there's some boundaries or some limits that you've placed upon yourself that need to be examined and see why they're there and if they need to be removed. But also an ability to kind of look closely and be able to read things around us, including people. There's also this element of teaching and counseling and giving advice, sort of being sort of this wisdom carrier type of energy that comes through, elder, grandmother, grandfather energy. But being in the sign of Libra, it definitely involves other people. It isn't just sort of a solo thing. This is a connection with the community and with partners. All right. So where does this eclipse take place? Well, um, where you'll be able to see this is in the southern portion of South America, Chile and Argentina being on the line. That's the only major landmass. That looks like the Falkland Islands are right here as well, just on the edge. That is able to see it. There are some islands here in the South Pacific that you'll see a partial solar eclipse, and in also Hawaii, particularly the main island of Hawaii, the Big Island. That will also be a place you can see the partial solar eclipse. But there's even just a slight amount of the Baja Peninsula of Mexico, and that you can see this in a few other countries. See partial eclipse in South America as well. But there really isn't a very large percentage of the population. It's very, very small that'll be able to see this unless a great deal of people are traveling to different islands or the southern portion of Chile and Argentina to see this eclipse. Again, this map is taken from timeanddate.com, and this eclipse is on October 2nd, 2024. And where it will take place here is in the Priestess constellation next to the star Parima, which is really, you can see that this constellation looks upside down because we're literally on the bottom of the planet, or really the other side of the planet, as it is a sphere. You can see Mercury there, the star Parima. Venus is pretty far away above the eclipse itself. And so Parima really marks that sort of that shoulder, the arm connection, the armpit of the priestess as it's holding on. There's a piece of also the shaft of grains that are being held right here too. So there's a strong earth component to this eclipse and a sacredness around this, a sacred energy around earth and its abundance as well. So this again, this eclipse is in the sign of Libra, but it's in the priestess constellation here. So this is taken from Puerto San Julian, Argentina, and so if you happen to be in that zone down there, there are some different small towns that are along that area where I'm sure there's going to be some flocks of people from South America and other places that want to go and check out this eclipse. So all the more power to you if you're able to do that. Okay, this eclipse is in the family, the Saros family of 144. And again, eclipses are in the Saros families are 18 years apart. And this eclipse goes back. The last time this happened was also in 2006, September 22nd, and that was in the sign of Virgo, 29 degrees Virgo. The next one takes place October 14, 2042, with another annular eclipse at 2051 Libra. So you can see it bumps up about 10, 11 degrees because there's always that 11 days of extra time. So you're going to get the sun moving about roughly a degree every day. This eclipse family is still ramping up. It began, looks like actually I don't think it was 1049. I think it was definitely a different year. I think that is an error on my part because it just getting going, 1298 years. So nearly 1300 years. So it goes back to the really this 15, 1600s. In that zone, I'll have to check that, but that's looks like a copy and paste error there. So apologize for that. But it does go all the way to 2980. It's still just sort of in the infancy of the eclipse family. So another 900 years. So it's only been going on for 3 or 4 centuries, and that's fairly young for an eclipse family. So we did have a recent Mercury square Uranus. There's still some energies around that happening even right now, as Mercury is shifting away and into back into the sign of Virgo. But we can still see some of the after effects of that. I wanted to just leave this in here for from one of the previous videos and talk about this because Uranus is right now strongly in Taurus. It's going to move into the sign of Gemini next year for a while before it retrogrades back into Taurus. But Mercury is about the mind and thinking and about patterns. And since it's moving into Virgo, which is, part of that polarity of where the lunar nodes are, the south node or north node, Pisces, Virgo, we're seeing uh, like maybe awakening to a little bit more energy around understanding these patterns that are happening in the world and being able to kind of respond and connect into them more strongly so that we can work with them more consciously. So, but with Uranus again uh, in the field and eventually going to be moving into Gemini next year, it'll be squaring Pisces and squaring Virgo. That's also going to be, there's going to be some additional shifts in the patterns, I think, with Uranus's entry into Gemini for sure. So, thank you guys for this. I wanted to share there's going to be continuing to be more videos, and I'm going to try to do more of those monthly previews and any other kinds of major events that take place, like eclipses and when a major planet moves into like a longer term planet moves into a new sign, or if there is like a more unusual conjunction taking place or things along those lines. So look forward to doing more of these videos and writing more. So also have a newsletter you can subscribe to too. I've got some events coming up here in September and October of 2024 and beyond. So I'm going to be you'll be able to see me in person along the West Coast, particularly along the West Coast, California and Oregon, the two primary things. But I could be in the future years places like Arizona and in Washington as well. So potentially even getting out to Colorado. But there's a lot to do to be able to do some of these other events in the future. So stay tuned for announcements around that. But my website is inspiralnexus.com. I do readings for a living and I teach astrology. I do mentoring as well, one-on-one mentoring. So feel free to contact me if you're interested in any of that, and providing also what I call astrological guidance for those that want regular astrological meetings that help you navigate each and every month. Those are also one of the options that you can choose from in the work that I do out there in the world. And you can also email me at inspiralnexus@gmail.com to find out more info as well. And mystaralchemy.com is a series, several courses that Kaylin Castell and I put together around the stars and learning more about how they fit into the astrological world, particularly on a ceremonial level, a magical level, and how important that is in our lives. Okay, thank you all. Please like and subscribe if you do, and share with others if that so happens to be what you want to do. And I look forward to seeing you again in the very near future. Thank you all for being here.